Mid-engine V8 Ferraris have always been a sweet spot in the lineup. They are some of the most desirable driver's options, bringing exotic appeal, exciting performance, and a more reasonable price point in the scheme of Ferrari prices. The F430 was introduced in the mid-2000s, right as the mid-engine competition for Ferrari started to get a bit more serious with the introduction of the Lamborghini Gallardo. By today's standards, this is no longer a fast car. We have family SUVs that make double the power, but what you can't ever take away is the allure of the prancing horse and of course the sound of that Ferrari V8. Welcome to Exhausted Reviews, enthusiast-focused car reviews. My name is EddieX, and today we are experiencing this 2005 Ferrari F430, which is now a 20-year-old car, which means it is a fantastic example of a depreciated Italian exotic supercar. 308, 328, 348, F355, 360, F430, 458 Italia, 488, and F8. That is the family lineage of mid-engine V8 Ferraris, and the F430 sits in that bridge between the older analog sports cars and the much more modern cutting-edge 458 Italia. Because of that it sits in that transition period, there's some more awkward elements like early paddle-shifted automated manual transmissions, but the F430 still preserves such an amazing analog, engaging, emotional driving experience, and today we're going to find out what it's like. In terms of the powertrain, the F430 has a 90-degree all-aluminum flat-plane crank 4.3-liter V8 that revs to 8,500 RPM. It makes 483 horsepower and 383 pound-feet of torque. It's got the twin-air intakes, and I love the powder-coated red on Ferrari engines. Now, compared to the outgoing 360, which made about 400 horsepower, this was a pretty substantial increase in power. But at the time, this competed with the first-generation Lamborghini Gallardo, which had a 5-liter naturally aspirated V10, making just a bit more power at 493. Now, in terms of the transmission, there were two available. You could either do the optional 6-speed Graziano F1 automated manual transmission, the paddles, or you could order it with a 6-speed gated manual transmission. Now, the manual transmission F430s are very rare, very valuable. These days, you can do aftermarket swaps, but this one here has the F1 gearbox. 0 to 60 would happen in about 3.5 to 4 seconds, depending on the model, the Spider or Coupe, and obviously the transmission. Let's talk about styling. So the F430 was designed by Pininfarina in collaboration with Frank Stephenson. He was working on Ferrari and Maserati models. And you want to know what else he designed? The McLaren P1. So he certainly knows how to make a good looking car. I think the looks of the F430 are aging very nicely. It looks much more modern than the 360, especially in this headlight area. We have other typical Ferrari design cues like the Scuderia shields here on the fender. We have intakes here on the shoulder because it is a mid-engine layout. And also, fun fact, this has the same doors as the 360. So there are some shared aspects, but overall, it's a pretty substantial change in the looks. We've got 19-inch wheels front and rear. There are two 25s up front, two 85s out back. We've got the split taillights that are moved upward. There is a more aggressive looking one, the Scuderia, so more aggressive front bumper and out back. But this one here is the classic F430 Coupe, and it's finished in Nuovo Blu Pazzi. Sorry to all the Italians, that was probably a horrendous pronunciation. Italian paint names are very challenging to pronounce, but it's this dark blue. In terms of the interior, the way I would describe the F430, and honestly most Italian cars of this era, is slightly chaotic. The scattering of buttons and controls can be a little bit overwhelming the first time you hop into this car. Like, you have a button here for going into reverse, your window switches are in the middle, you have a panel of buttons on the left to open the fuel door or open your front trunk, and a quirk of the Ferrari is you have to have the key inserted, ignition on, in order to open the front trunk. And this is a Ferrari thing. Whenever you Yes, insert the key. It makes these terrible beeping, screaming noises at you as it's like initializing. Calm down, please. Okay, there we go. Peace and quiet again. Obviously, this is going to be a very analog interior. This is a 2005, right? We have not a single touchscreen. We have the big yellow tachometer right in the middle, front and center, an analog speedometer that goes to 220 miles an hour. And seeing the yellow prancing horse here on the steering wheel is pretty cool. We have the engine start-stop button and our Manettino on the right for changing the driving dynamics. Also, compared to the Gallardo, the F430 and typically Ferrari versus Lamborghini, I feel they have much more open feeling interiors, much more space. The Lambos can feel a little more claustrophobic, like a race cockpit, whereas the F430 is actually a pretty comfortable, spacious place to be in. With that, let's go for a drive. So what is the F430 like to drive? Well, I gotta say, it definitely feels like a 20-year-old Ferrari behind the wheel, and that's not a bad thing. Modern day supercars, you're just in a supercomputer. That's what they feel like. If you try out a Ferrari 296, everything is just digital screens. I mean, we don't even have a start-stop button anymore. It's a little touch screen. There is so much going on in the new cars. They are stupendously quick, especially now that they are essentially all forced induction and or hybridized. The drive feel is completely different. They make ridiculous amounts of power, low-end torque, and the limits are just so high and there's so many electronic aids. You feel less of the man and the machine, the engagement, the emotion. Compared to the latest cutting edge stuff, this is definitely, it's almost antiquated in some ways. But it's more fun that it makes you work harder. This is a fun road for this car because it's not tremendously high speed. The road surface isn't fantastic, and a lot of sharp curves and elevation, but it's just much more of a simple experience. We just have a steering wheel that's very simple. We do have the Manettino, which I think this might be the first introduction of it, and I'm in race right now. It changes all the settings from your e-diff to the dampers, all the calibration, your stability program. So race is about as far as I would go on the street, especially in the car that's not mine. You can go to everything off. You better be a little more confident or brave. That being said, in a car like this, it's not making 800 horsepower, so you could run at the red line and not be doing 150 miles an hour. Now, we need to talk about the transmission. When I was younger, less experienced, less context in the automotive world, I love to hate on this era, right? I like to call the Audi R8s R-tronic gearbox are tragic. E-gear was just slow, jerky. Ferrari F1 transmissions were the same, but my feelings on this type of transmission has evolved. It seems to give the cars more character because they are flawed. You have to learn kind of a certain way of driving them. I still have the habit of driving these where when I go to upshift, I typically just briefly let off the accelerator. So there we go, up. It seems to make the shift just a little bit smoother, snappier, quicker. Downshifts take a little bit more time. It's not like the modern dual clutch transmissions that are just lightning fast and perfect. With some of the newer dual clutch transmissions, they actually program in a little bit more of a kick to make it feel like you're sportier as you toggle up into sport and race modes for the powertrain. And what is that simulating? This older era of single clutch automated manual paddle transmissions, because it feels more raw and brutal, because a double clutch transmission doesn't need that. A dual clutch does not need that. It should just be perfectly smooth all the time. Now, a gated manual F430, an OEM gated manual F430, is one of my favorite gated manual experiences ever. I got to take a manual F430 and Spider for a quick drive a couple years ago, and I just really liked it. It was so even more engaging and fun. Now, OEM gated manual cars are stratospherically expensive now, but the aftermarket has figured out a way to swap them. So you can buy an F1 transmission equipped F430, take it to a shop, they've got a kit, and then you get a gated manual shifter. Now, those are never going to have the same value as an OEM manual car, right? Those are going to be the collector pieces, the truly special ones. They were much more rare than the F1 transmission. But in my opinion, it really does enhance the driving experience. And I've definitely toyed around with the idea of like, should I buy one of these and do like a gated swap? That would be such a cool car and just a forever keeper car. I haven't driven a swapped car, but I've heard they can be pretty good. No weird codes or errors or things like this. It's easier when they were older like this because they don't have all these crazy electronic systems and various control modules and fancy stability programs all tied into how the transmission works. So you don't have a bunch of ECUs that piss off if you get rid of your factory transmission. But honestly, driving this today with the paddle shifters, as soon as you just kind of change your mindset on how you're driving it, it's still a lot of fun and engaging. You just kind of have to know. And maybe that's age and wisdom speaking, and maybe it's the fact that we're getting tired of the modern era just being all so computerized and perfect in every way. It's giving me an appreciation for this feel, and that really ties into the overall impressions of driving this car again. It just still evokes that analog emotion, that engaging experience. This car is in that awkward spot, more modern than the 360 and F355 that came before it. Nowhere close to the spaceship 458 Italia. When you hop out of this and hop into a 458, you feel like you went into the space age. I mean, dual clutch, more digital stuff. It's a whole different era, kicked off a dawn of the modern supercars. That was fantastic, don't get me wrong. The 458, the Huracan, the McLaren 12C, 650S, Porsche GT3s, those are amazing, amazing machines, but a very different era compared to this. This car, the Gallardo of this generation, the Murcielago, the Ferrari 550, like those cars, they really bridged the gap. And I think because they were the poster car for my generation, my age group, these are the ones that are going to continue to be appreciated and enjoyed. And they're going to bring us experiences that aren't the fastest, they're not the quickest, they're not the best handling, but they are going to be some of the most fun. And what is a car like this about in today's day and age? Fun, right? We buy these things to have fun. The F430 has a couple known issues. Sticky buttons on the interior, this one has already had that taken care of. The exhaust headers are also known to crack, the factory ones. It's almost a guaranteed thing, so this one has already had them changed out to aftermarket ones as a form of preventative maintenance. There's also sometimes bubbling of the leather dash. But again, it's a 20-year-old Ferrari, so we're bound to have some things. With the F1 gearbox, you're going to want to make sure you get a clutch reading to see what the clutch is at. Obviously, a new clutch in a Ferrari, an older Ferrari, any Ferrari, is not going to be a cheap thing. Now, while this is a new engine compared to the 360, it's technically an evolution of the platform. The 430 is a tiny bit heavier than the 360, but it more than makes up for that with the extra power. This is still positively lightweight by today's standards, 3,200 pounds, and it feels still pretty playful. We have the E-diff out back, so they love taking Formula One technology and trickling it down. I believe that actually was outlawed in Formula One, but like modern era sports cars, is an electronic differential that can shuffle the power between the rear wheels. Obviously, purely rear wheel drive. The Manettino can change the personality a bit. It's not massive. When I was driving here on the way, I was in sport because it softens the dampers just slightly, but now in a curvy road, I'm gonna go into race. I don't feel that it's quite as pronounced as maybe some of the modern different drive modes can change the personality of the vehicle. You were able to option carbon ceramic brakes on these too. This one does not have them. And this is the first year and regular F430. There is the more aggressive Scuderia and the 16M on top, and the Scuderia followed the same formula of slightly more hardcore. So the 360 then had the Challenge Stradale. The era for this one was the Scud, and then 458, Speciale, 488, Pista, and F8 actually never got one. F8 lost out there. So should you buy an F430 20 years later? Is that a good idea? I think it is. You get the exotic appeal experience of owning a mid-engine Ferrari. For many, this was an iconic dream car. I have early memories of seeing an F430 convertible, a Spider, a yellow one, and begging my mom to turn the car around because I wanted to go drool over it. It was just in a parking lot somewhere. That is one of my earliest car memories. This vehicle came out when I was in elementary school and just getting into cars, middle school and high school. It is the definition of a poster car, and now it has come within the realm of possibility. I mean, the price point that these are at, there are Corvettes that are that kind of money, right? When this was brand new, base price was around like 160-ish. It varied over time, depending on if you're doing the F1 gearbox, Spider, and obviously Scuds got more expensive. But like I mentioned, carbon ceramic brakes is an option, and it's a Ferrari, right? So you can check a lot of boxes and get this thing into the low to mid 200,000s range. Now, 20 years later, with miles on them, the pricing spread is going to be a bit wider, obviously, because there's varied condition, different specs, how they've been taken care of. The absolute low end of the 430 market, I've seen some for like 80. But those are going to be much more rough. Higher mileage, interior is going to be beat, maybe not as desirable of a spec. Maybe there's history, accidents, and so forth. For a clean, nice F430 that you probably would want to buy and own, 125 to 150 gets you a pretty nice one. Now we're talking F1 transmission. The gated manual ones have crept past $200,000, and then it keeps going on from there. Scuderias, more hardcore, even more rare, more expensive. Those I think I've been climbing a lot recently too, over 300s at this point. And the most rare, the pinnacle, is going to be the 16M, the convertible version of the Scud. Those are going to be the most valuable, and I've seen those for over 400s at this point. I don't think 430s, like regular 430s, like this one, are necessarily going to appreciate a ton in the future, because they did build a lot of these. It was like estimate around 15,000 total production run just from 05 to 09. If you compare that to the Gallardo, that's about the similar volume the Gallardo had, but Lamborghini ran that model from like 2004 to 2014, so much longer. So there's a good amount of F430s out there, but I think that makes it an appealing choice because it's a reasonable price point to get a sort of modern era Ferrari. Mid-engine V8 still is great to drive. I love the looks of it, and the most important thing is because there is now aftermarket support. There is tons of resources out there, whether it's independent shops, the forums, individual owners who have gained expertise and they know the preventative maintenance, the aftermarket solutions to fix things, like for example the headers, right? Everybody knows you just got to do the headers on an F430 and how to recondition the sticky buttons, and these things would make a budget exotic supercar ownership experience much more enjoyable, less stressful, and hopefully less expensive. I think on a curvy road like this, I would prefer driving the 430, but if it's my day-to-day car show all year round older supercar, the Gallardo is still really appealing. That V10 with an exhaust sounds just amazing, way better than the 5.2 they replaced it with. This 430 engine still sounds really nice. A flat plane crank and a V8 Ferrari is not a bad noise, but it doesn't quite have as high-pitched of a sound. I think there's aftermarket exhaust that can make it even more high-pitched. This one doesn't have that F1 scream that so many people like to go for, but this is a super clean example, although the passenger seat keeps going front and back with nobody sitting in it right now, so 20-year-old car. Also, this one only has 15,000 miles on it, which, when you think about it, is way less than 1,000 miles per year. So the previous owners of this car bought it and just never drove it. And I think the best thing to do now is, if you want one of these, go find a nice one that's been taken care of, buy it, put miles on it, and enjoy it, because that's something I would love to do. The Ferrari F430, a nice sweet spot between the 360 and 458. And I think, kind of like the Murcielago before it went to the Aventador, it's the final of the analog supercars, the really analog era. And you want to know the other car that the owner of this F430 has in the garage? Murcielago LP640. So he appreciates these for sure. I hope you guys enjoyed this review of the Ferrari F430, a fantastic depreciated Italian exotic supercar. Thanks for watching.